Okay, start recording. So before coding, actually, just some advice. Okay, no, where is it? So we stopped here. Okay, we were discussing and summarizing what the useEffect does, and as we said in the beginning, it's a very dense API. That it does a lot of things. Okay, depending, especially on the second parameter that you pass, the list of dependencies. Okay. There is not only the useEffect. If you look at the Reactor documentation, there are many other, other life cycle situations. Not sure if so many, but I mean, there are other hooks that can help you during the life cycle of the components. We are not going to discuss them in this course, okay? So this use layout effect, use memo, use callback, and so on. And please don't use them at the exam. If I see them, of course, I will ask you why you used it and how it works. Okay? Because at the exam, we are going to make sure that you know what you did first. Well, before that, that you did it yourself. And second, that you know what you did. Okay? It's not forbidden to be helped by, I don't know, ChatGPT and so on. But you need to know what it did for you, okay? And of course, if the style is so different, so on, of course, the doubt comes in our mind. So, you know, it's normal that we would like you to come out from this course that you know what you are doing with web application, how web application works, and so on, and that you solved more or less what was assigned in terms of application to develop, okay? So anything can be used provided that you know how it works and you know why you wanted to use that way instead of the way we explained during the course, okay? We expect that what we explained during the course is enough to develop the solution for the exam, okay? So these are basically stuff that sometimes can help you optimize the application and so on, so it's not really needed for us. Once you will go working with React in a work environment and so on, you might have a look at these things, and hopefully with the base that you get, that you got in this course, you can easily, let's say, use these additional functionalities. So just a couple of slides, three, 4 slides. The rest is for next time. As an introduction on how to load data from the server. Even though we already saw some examples, but now we try to be a bit more systematic. How to handle API calls in React. Okay? So first of all, we notice there are different states in React. And why we are talking about states? Because when you load information from the server, you put it into a state because it's something that comes asynchronously from the server. So it has to be stored somewhere, which is actually a state in React. And storing it in the state, so changing the state, makes React change the appearance. So basically, you show this information. Okay, so there is a set of states, which is an application state or entity state. This is what is typically retrieved from the backend, from the server, through the APIs. Okay? It typically accessible by various components, and it's the data that your application manipulates. So it's data that you will use and you will change when you want to manipulate the data in terms of CRUD operations. So create, read, update, delete, and so on. Okay? Today we will only deal with the read operation, which is the simplest one, and next time we will focus on the other ones. And then remember, there are presentation states, which are not really the ones we care about today. I mean, we actually saw one. It was the waiting status. Okay? The waiting was not supposed to contain data coming from the server. It's just a presentation state. We want to show something to the user, the clock, to tell the user, You need to wait. We are still waiting for the answer and so on. Typically, it's a local state of the component or a group of components. Okay? And so this is not the focus of our discussion today. Okay? Even though we need to manipulate these states as well, because when you finish loading the data, you might want to set the state. Okay? But it doesn't contain the answer from the server. Okay? Okay, good. So there are use cases that we will cover mostly next time, apart from the first loading of the data. Okay? So just a recommendation, before we start coding, keep your methods that interact with the server in a separate file, because it's easier to handle in the client application. It's easier to use them in different parts in your application and so on. So like a api.js file is fine. That's what I already published, because I already wrote this code before coming here, because it takes a while. But then after you define the APIs, it's mostly cut and paste, adapting for the single APIs. But I mean, handling errors and so on is mostly the same. So keep the details of the HTTP methods inside the API module. So basically, APIs export some methods, functions that you might call to load the data from the server. So you don't have to run fetch directly inside the code of your components, okay? Because, I mean, it's sort of ugly, but it's not just about being ugly. It's just code which is less maintainable, okay? And also, if you have things separate from the server, you can even swap the file, and in case you don't have the server yet, you can write a fake server. So basically just some code that returns what the server would return, just to test your APIs and so on. Okay? So this is the architecture of what we are going to do from now on. So this is the React application, the blue one. That's the DOM, React components. You have the user state, and now we have the useEffect as well. Event handlers. Don't forget about the event handlers, as I told you. Even them can start a request, I mean, fetching or sending data to the server. And then there's this API.js, which I recommend, which is like the lower layer where the fetch is actually implemented with the correct URL for the API and so on. Of course, the fetch is called, which is the one that starts an HTTP request from the browser toward the server, and this is the API server. So not the initial one from which the application is served, but the API server, the one we developed at the beginning of the course, that has Express and then has the routes, so the get, post, put, delete, and so on. Though, I mean, just a matter again of organizing a code that then goes typically into the database to retrieve the data. Okay? And this discussion about rehydrating, we will have it next time. But basically, rehydrating means here load the application state from the server. And the application state in the beginning for the application is the data that we need to show at the start of the application, when the application starts. Okay? And now we have a way to do that. Right? The useEffect with a callback that will call the fetch with the correct URLs to load the information from the server, and an empty list of dependency, because we want to run it as soon as the components get mounted. Okay? We will come back on this slide next time. So last slide, and then we'll try to code a little bit. So rehydrating and mount time basically means load information from the server. Okay? Information will be loaded through the useEffect, no dependencies, and you need to fetch something. So you need to have APIs that return that information, the information you want to load. Okay? We already saw the stuff about handling no responses and so on. So we just need to code a little bit. Okay? So let's go to the Visual Studio Code. We change the directory. So we need to stop, okay, both the server and the client. Change directory, React QA client. Now we have two directories, okay? Because I put the server, it's basically the server that we had until week 3 or 4, I don't remember, okay? So it contains a lot of things. Just to show you, contains an API that reads all the questions, so it returns all the questions. It returns a single question. It returns all the answers related to a question, and so on. Okay? So this code is already on the GitHub. Okay? Nothing really special. It's just, you know, DAO, get questions. So if you go in the DAO, I think there's a select stuff, and it reads from the database. Okay? Nothing really strange or new. Okay? Okay, good. So, of course, npm install because it needs some packages, but then node index. Okay, we'll start the server. The server already has this. This is the DAO, so the index. Already has this course. We will discuss about the course next time. Okay, so it works in short. Client. In the client, that's a client we had last time, so the one with the routes. Let's try the client. Okay. Oh, it's too big. Right? Okay. So no useEffect for now. If I load the client, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on, but this is just towards the React development server. So there's no API going, no request going towards localhost 3001. Okay? So the data that is here is hard coded in the code now for the moment. So it's up. Okay, just here. Okay, you remember question, init, initial answer list. It's just hard coded question, QA model. Okay, just here. Okay, now of course we want to get rid of this stuff and we want to load the data from the server. Okay, so how do we do? Well, we need to identify a component where at mount time, we put this callback through the useEffect that is run at mount time, that calls the fetch and loads the data. And once the data is loaded, we set it to the state. And the rest happens automatically, as usual, with React. Okay? So we start with an empty state, and it will be set to something, the list of questions and answers, by the when the fetch will return. Okay, and so the set state will be executed by the set state. Okay. So first we need to identify where is the place, the best place to put this useEffect. Well, the useEffect has to do one thing in the end: set of the state. Right. So there is a place where you have the state that you want to update with the data coming from the server, right? So actually the place is here. We have the answers, right, that we initialize with the initial answer list. Okay? So which is the component? Well, the component is up. No problem. We can do it in up. Actually, it's very normal. I would say most of the submission for the exam do this in up, because up is the first component that is being rendered. So you get the data, and often you have the state in up, okay, because of all the reason we discussed before, because we had to lift the state, because so it's visible to all components and so on. So no problem. Okay, useEffect, right? Let's decide what to write. Okay, let me check. The useEffect has been imported. Don't forget, you need to import the useEffect. Okay? I already did it. As you import the user state, useEffect is another thing to import. But I mean, typically the environment if not the environment, the runtime will tell you in the console, useEffect is not defined if you forget. Okay, so useEffect. What to write inside? Well, we write the callback. Without the callback, it's useless. So, callback. Okay? And this callback runs at mount time. So, mount time means empty array. Okay? useEffect. Empty array, it will run at mount time. If you don't trust, put console log inside and you will see when it prints the console log. Okay? Okay, good. And now we need to write this fetch, right? It would be something like fetch and so on. Okay. But as I told you, I don't really like to write fetch inside here because fetch might be complex. Let's have a look at the API file I provide you. I already provided you. So there are async functions. It's fine. And they are async functions because I like to use the await. I mean, it's not really needed, but I think there are, no, here there are no examples with a then, but I will give you later on an example with a then in case you like then catch instead of the await, okay? I mean, just fetch returns a promise, so all what we said about the promise applies here, okay? So, I think the one we actually need is this one. Get answers by question ID. That's an API /questions/ID/answers. Fetch URL plus questions ID answers. Okay. What's this URL? Well, actually just, the first part of the URL, http localhost 3001. Just kept in a separate variable for convenience in case you want to change the port and so on. Okay. I mean, for the exam, try to stick to the ports. I mean, the one that we have in the example, so it's easier to test for us as well. Okay. So /API/questions ID answer. Just make sure that was the correct one on the server side. Just have a look. /API questions ID answers. Okay, that's fine. Okay. And the rest depends on the port where we run the server, right? 3001, okay, it's fine. So, let's go back to app. Actually, not really the fetch. I would like to, no, where is the API? I've lost the file. No, API, here, okay. I wanted to double click. Okay. So, this is just a fetch, await, response. Don't forget the response is a JSON because that's what we chose. I mean, actually I chose it for you before starting the course. But, I mean, it's also what, most applications do in practice. If you have a look at many applications, you open the network tab, you will see exchange, data exchange in JSON format. So not really something just for this course. So you need to pass the JSON, and it returns a promise. I mean, the method is already there, .json, because the fetch returns an object that has this method. And just to remember, you need to await on it because it returns a promise as well. And then that's the answer. If the answer is fine, so response was okay, okay, you just create what you need, okay? Might be enough to return answer, but maybe you want to personalize things. Like, for instance here, you see the day.js? I mean, JSON has no objects. Objects in terms of curly brackets, but not JavaScript objects. If I want a day.js object, I need to create it myself. JSON can only transfer numbers, strings, booleans. What was it? Null and I don't remember. Not sure what else. Okay, yeah, boolean and null. We said it. Maybe there's something else I don't remember now. Anyway, no objects. So if my code runs expecting a property of an object to be a DJS object or some other library object and so on, I need to create it somewhere before I pass the array containing the object to my application. Either I change the application working with just strings, and every time I need to process the information, I create my objects and so on, or here I need to create the object, okay? Because JSON doesn't transfer JavaScript objects, okay? So this is what is done here. I mean, answers, we have a list of objects, and actually each object has an ID, text, response, score, and date, but it's a string, and a question ID. And here we create the object, the AJS object, okay? Basic error handling, I mean, this is a possibility. You could also check in case the response is not JSON. I mean, I think this is a reasonable compromise in terms of complexity. I mean, of course, you can check for anything can go wrong, but I mean, the server is yours, okay? So you expect to have a response in JSON format if you contact your own server, okay? At least it might happen you cannot contact the server. That might happen because it depends on the network, not on you. But if you contact your own server on your own APIs, I mean, you're pretty sure that you get a JSON in response, okay? Maybe not what you want. Maybe you don't have permission and so on, but you get a JSON, okay? Okay, so this returns an array. Answers map is an array, okay? So how do I use it? Well, I need to export it because it's another file, and I export it in this way. So I can write on the other side, API.get question answered by question ID, and it works. If I import it, okay, don't forget, I need to import it. So import API from, right? Yes, API from API. Okay? Oops, what's wrong? Not really sure. Oh, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong. Did I? Yes, there's a useEffect has 3 dots. Sorry. Okay, later. Okay, so this import. Why is no brackets? Because it's a default export. Okay, but you like a named export. You do a name export. You put the brackets. I mean, we don't really care. I mean, anything that works is fine. Okay, we don't really care. And once it works, it's okay, right? So useEffect. So we don't actually write fetch here. We write API, get answer by question ID, and for a moment let's put 1, okay? Because I mean, I should load the questions as well, right? At the moment I have only 1 question. It's okay like this, okay? And so, actually this returns what? I don't remember. Okay, let's go and check. Get answers by question ID. It's an async function. It returns a promise. What's the value of the promise? It's the value that we return inside the function. So the array, right? The promise, because it's an async function, and the content, the value of the promise, of the fulfilled promise, is the return value of the function. So that means that this is a promise. Either we do await, just for trying. Let's do .then. It's a promise, okay? .then, new line. So .then And then we get a parameter, which is actually the value of the fulfilled promise. Right? So answer list. We need to pass to the then a callback, a function that does the operation with the value of the fulfilled promise. What's the operation? Actually, it's set of the state. And we are done. Set answers, answer list. Okay? Yes. That's the basic stuff. Save. Let's see if it complains or not. No complaints, good. Okay. There's still this initial answers list. I want to try if it loads from the server. So I don't want to have a list here. Of course it works. I mean, if the list is already hard-coded, just make an empty list here in the state. So when you mount, when React mounts the component, the list is empty. It runs the useEffect, because at mount time it always runs the callback to the useEffect. It does the fetch, loads the data, and if everything works, it sets the state. It does the re-render, and the empty list becomes populated with what we want. Okay? And that's basically all. So just to make sure, there's no content coming from here. Well, you see that the variable is not used anymore, but let's comment the hard-coded stuff as well. Okay? So save. The server is running. Yes. So just reload the application. Okay, something is it's coming. I put a delay, I think, on the server just for testing. Okay, but you saw it showed an empty list. That was the initial state. The empty list here. This empty list. And it took a while to load the information from the server. When the set answers is run, React re-renders the application. So it updates the part that needs to be changed, and the list comes out. Let's try again. So it's empty now. It takes a while to get the response, just to see this behavior. Okay? And you see that the last operation on the networking tab is the fetch. Actually, get HTTP localhost 3001 API questions 1 answers. That's a request. No request body, but there's a body in the response, of course. Without the body in the response, get is useless, right? So actually, the raw stuff is this one, but the browser is so kind that it parses the JSON for us, so it's easy to read the response. And you will see that here, date is a string. Okay? So that's why we had to convert it into the day.js, because our application expected the day.js object. Okay? But JSON cannot transport a day.js object. It can only transport strings or numbers. Okay. So that's basically all. You see it 2 times, so twice. Why? The reason is the one I told you before, because we are in this strict mode. So every time a component is mounted, React renders it twice. It means that it runs the callback of the useEffect twice. But if you just do a get, it's fine. Okay, you don't modify the data on the server, and this should be the normal conditions, the normal way of operating an application. When it loads the data, so it shows something, and just gets data, so there's no problem in running it twice. But we get the advantage that in case of problems, React tells us, be careful of something. Okay. Okay, good. So we're almost done, right? So it's very simple what you are going to do in the lab. You have a state, okay? And in the state, you just load the stuff from the server, okay? You need to write this API file in the lab, so it's not already given. But I mean, it's just a matter of creating the fetch, pointing to the correct URL, make sure you have the server working. If your server doesn't work, use the one that we provided in the solutions, I don't know, week number 3, I think, something like this, and start from that point, okay? I just wanted to show you that actually we can do more than one call in the same, more than one fetch in the same callback for the useEffect. I mean, this is just a function. You decide what you write in this function. There's nothing wrong in doing more things, like doing a fetch twice. I mean, not the same fetch, of course, but another one. Like we have a second endpoint, I mean a second API, that is the one that gets the question, information about the question. At the moment, it's hard-coded. You see the questions here, right? No. It's written here. I don't like it. Let's load the question from the server as well. Just, you know, API dot get question. Of course, I already implemented the question, the get question. Okay, one dot then. Okay, dot then. What was Q, right? Q set question. But I must tell you, then I think that's all. Actually, there's no question state, right? Let's create one. I mean, for anything that you need to load from the server, there's no other alternative. You need to have a state, because when things arrive, you need to set them into a state, because you want to trigger the reactor render. Okay? No other option. So const question, yes, question set question, use state, what was it, an object, right? So an empty object is fine. Okay, so in the beginning here the question was shown, okay, and now it's loaded and not simply hard-coded here. So just let me comment these lines, which are the lines that basically create the information hard-coded in our application. Created, actually. Also, the question now is not needed anymore. Okay? So, the QA models. Let's see if it works. I'm not sure. Okay, question. We should check if question is correctly used. I think so, but I don't remember. Let's see. Yes. Okay. You see the difference? The first API has no delay. The second has. Okay. Let's see again. See that Q1 comes out immediately, almost immediately. You can perceive a little time instant in which there's no question. Okay? But you see it, get localhost API question 1, request nothing, response, and this is the response. That's what I want to write here. Okay? And that's the same mechanism. Okay, just to show you which was the server. So the server has this timeout on the list of answers. There's no timeout, rest JSON. Okay, so immediately gives you an answer. But you never know. I mean, the server can be busy. It's doing you know, it takes time to read from the disk and so on, and the operating system is doing something else. I mean, you never know, okay? Just be prepared of the fact that, I mean, you start with a certain content and then it will be updated, okay? Again, twice. Why? Because what we said before, it's a strict mode, and so it will do it twice at mount time. So it will mount twice the component. Okay, let's try to insert some icon that says, well, I'm still waiting for the content, okay? How do you do? But actually, it's a presentation state. Right? We said we are waiting or we are not waiting anymore, okay? So we need to come out with some, no, this is the 7. We need to come out with some additional state, okay? Where did I put it? Initial loading. Oops, it's not in the solution. Doesn't matter. We'll create it now, okay? Call it, I don't know, waiting. Set waiting, as we did, okay? Use state. Well, in the beginning we are waiting, right? So, true. Okay. And now the difficult part. I mean, this waiting should be shown somewhere, right? I mean, we should have some render part, some return that uses this waiting, right? So actually, where do we want to show it? I think in the answer route, right? Yeah, it's fine. Or yeah, answer route actually. Well, actually we could put it here before we render the answer route. Okay, what's inside the answer route? I don't remember. Actually, I'm deviating a little bit from the solution I had. Actually, it's a row call and so on. So actually, we just need the row call. Okay. So let's just go back. And so we do waiting, right? Waiting. So I think it's row call, right? Row call. Just to keep a bit of consistency inside the code, okay? Because we have the these are the routes. Where is the? Let me search for the container. Yes, layout. What's the layout? Okay. No layout, so. Well, we will check the code later. Anyway, what do we put here? I mean, what you want? Waiting, okay? You want a nice icon? I will give it to you later. And now, wait, just don't forget that you need to set it, okay? At a certain point, you need to reset this state. I mean, to change this state. Otherwise, the waiting is still shown, even if you loaded the stuff, okay? Because you need to, I mean, it's a state. You need to update it after you finished, okay? Like here, set waiting false, okay? Okay, so let's try again. Yes, okay. Okay, good. Let me see if I can improve it a little bit. This is just aesthetics. I think there's spinner. Spinner, yes. If I remember correctly. But I mean, just, you know. Okay. That's why we like if you use Bootstrap, React Bootstrap, and so on, because it gives you, you know, this nice stuff. Okay. But I mean, we don't really care that much at the exam. Okay. Of course, something usable, but I mean, not really that the focus is on aesthetics. Okay. Auto, there's no author here, right? Why? I mean, I guess we need to debug a little bit, right? Author Enrico is fine, and so we set it, and question. I think question is the state, yes. So let's have a look at the answer route. Question, props question. It was questioner. Okay. Just make sure everything is coherent. I guess in the API, author is questioner. Questioner. Oh, was it questioner? Questioner. Okay, so this line, which seems a bit strange, I mean, it takes an object and creates an object which is practically the same. It's the place where you can do the match between what the server returns and your application. Okay, just, you know, try to be a little bit consistent, since you are also the one who designs the server. You can decide to change things on the server. Sometimes the server is given, it's developed by somebody else. It's just an API which has some documentation and says, okay, the questionnaire is named questionnaire, okay? And for you, it's the author, and you call it author in your object, in your application, and so on. So this is the place where you can change things, okay? How do you know it comes out as author? Well, use the browser. That's the same thing I will do at the exam, okay? Because I didn't write your... I'm not the one who writes your code, so this is a sort of debugger. This is what travels on the network from the server to the client. So author here and the name. Okay, so let's see if it works. Save, and of course we need to reload, because the application now does not reload anything until the user does something. But I mean, we didn't attach any fetch to any user interaction. Okay, so at the moment there's no user interaction. Thursday we will do something. Okay, but for today, just at mount time. So actually we need to rerun, so reload the application. Let's try to do it. Okay, okay. Okay, good. So I think we are almost done. Let me think what is missing here. Yeah, we have the wait, and the waiting. Oops. Yeah, that. Okay. There is okay, question. Yeah, I was thinking, well, of course we can polish the code a little bit, like I mean, if you have a question, the same value, question ID. In this case, we just start with the, you know, we know the ID, but in a normal case, we just ask for the list of all questions, and so maybe the user interface should change, okay? Or just we ask for the list of all questions, and then we select the first one. I mean, it just depends on the application, right? So, question ID, it's fine. So it should work. Let me see. Okay. Okay. So can anybody tell me why, since we have this set question now here, I mean, it's not delayed, right? And it's just the other one that is delayed. Why are we still, why are we not showing the question immediately when it arrives? You see that, I mean, actually, you see here, look at the network tab below. You see, one of the answers already arrived. I mean, the question already arrived. I mean, it's up to you to design the application in the way you want it to work, okay? So actually, my decision was, I mean, here, I just decided, okay, it's waiting. I don't render the answer route, okay? And if the answer route contains the question, okay, the state is set, but it's just not shown, okay? So if I want to change this, well, I need to change the way in which I handle the state, okay? Or the properties of the component, the props. So, I mean, this is good in terms of, you know, what you might want to do. Another thing you might want to do is having the second API called only when the first has finished, so you are sure about which question you want to load, okay? That's another thing you can do. How can you make sure that the first call towards the server is returned, and then you send the second one? I mean, it's like waiting for the first promise to be solved, and then waiting for the second, and then running the second one, right? Because at the moment, what happens is you call this function. This function calls the fetch. The fetch immediately sends the request to the server, returns immediately a promise that then it will be solved. Okay, the code goes on, and the second one is sent. Okay. In fact, if you look at the browser here in the network tab, they start at the same time. Just that one is still pending, right? But they start at the same time. It's not like the first one gets the answer and then the second starts, okay? But everything you learned about promises, async, await, and so on, it can be applied here, okay? If you need to wait for the first to return something, well, either you have two options. Either you use the await, okay, or you chain things, okay. Then you could make, well, let's make it this way. Dot then, okay, dot then. And actually, I don't care about the value. Let me see if I can close it somewhere the correct place. Here, I think. Okay. So the second starts only when the first is solved. Okay. Okay. I think so. Let me see it again. Yes. Okay. You see the first, and then after the first has been rendered, okay. I mean, actually not rendered because we don't render it, but the state is set. The second fetch is run. Okay. So, I mean, not to say that you have to, do, complicated things here, but I mean, you can arrange things as you think they are appropriate for your case. Okay. just by using the knowledge and the, and simply what you already know about the promises and so on. It's just a sync code, okay? So let me go back. If we don't really care about question ID was fine. About which one should be run first, should run first, yes. I mean, it's very common to have many APIs to be run in the same useEffect, okay? So let's try it again. Okay, good. So actually, in short, we implemented something like this. So you fetch something, you get it. I mean, we didn't do it with the async, but it's the same, right? So you get typically an array, sometimes an object, like with the question. You set it. You say, I'm done. I mean, set loading false, set waiting false, and so on. And that's all. Okay? So I think we are a bit ahead of schedule. I thought the example would have taken more. Let me think if we need to fix anything else, or we can improve anything else. I think it's all. Yes. Okay. So I think we can simply continue a little bit. Okay. So next Thursday we have less things to do. Okay. So in short, we implemented this the first step that is the simplest one. Okay. This one I've not seen anybody get this wrong at the exam. Okay. Oh, let me show you something. That instead sometimes happen at the exam, but sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not. Okay, what happens in case the server is not running? Okay, I'm stopping the server, so the server is stopped now. There's no server running, right? I mean, nothing. Okay, stays waiting. It's like you don't have the internet connection, right? So note, there is no error, okay? The fetch does not return an error in this case. Well, probably at a certain point you will get something. I mean, there's a timeout, but I guess it's in the order of minutes, okay? Not really seconds, okay? Because the network can be slow. And so what sometimes happens at the exam is this situation, but typically that's because you have a server which has not been committed correctly. That's the worst thing, but sometimes it's just not, I mean, the server is not running. Okay, unfortunately, solving this point, I mean, making the application stop before something is returned by the server is very complicated. We need a library basically, because the fetch doesn't allow us to handle this situation very easily. Okay, but just don't be worried too much about this situation. It's probably the server is not running. The server has crashed. Remember, the server should never crash, because otherwise that's what we get. Okay, or it's running on a different port because I don't know, you change the port, you forget to change it in the client, and so on. Okay, so there's actually nothing we can do for this situation. Okay, because we cannot really distinguish this situation from the situation in which the network is simply slow. Okay, so it's taking time, or the server is slow in giving the response. Okay, okay, good. So back to the slides. So now you got that we are talking about application state, and application state means the data that the application is manipulating. The rest is just for presentation. It's just something, maybe it's even data, but which has not been communicated and stored to the server yet. Okay? And so the first thing is to retrieve the initial set of data from the server, and then you should be able to update and change data on the server, otherwise the application is useless. Okay? And the point is that, this is a web application, so there is only one server but many clients. So it is good. It is good to periodically reload data from the server. We will talk about more on this on Thursday. But let's say every time you have the need to go to the server and do an operation, update, delete, and so on, it's good to reload at least part of the data that you changed, so that in case somebody else has done other modifications, you get the new values. Okay? Because you're not automatically getting the values from the server. Just the client is initiating the operation of getting data from the server. Okay? It's not like the Google Doc and so on. We are not going to see this condition, this way of operating a web application, because this is just basic web applications. Okay? I'm not saying it's impossible, it's for sure more difficult. Okay? I'm not sure if React allows an easy way to do this. Okay? Maybe some libraries, yes, but okay. So we solved, let's say, a subset of the first point, how to integrate remote HTTP APIs when at least we are loading the data in the beginning. Okay? Third point, in a certain sense, we solved it because, what we do is having additional presentation states that when the data is not yet there, shows something else. The spinner, the clock, and so on. Okay? I just addressed the second point. When to load data from remote API, it requires a bit more discussion and update the remote data as well. So that's the architecture, okay? What I wanted you to focus on is the fact that, data in the application is, a state which is actually, a state not in the sense of React state, a state of the application which is actually needs to be synchronized with the server. The server holds the state which is persistent. So if you reload the application, you need to load the information from the server, and vice versa. If you change the state of the data in your application, you need to store this information to the server to make it persistent. Okay, and this concept in web application goes under the name of rehydrating and dehydrating. Okay, so rehydrating means taking the application state from the server, which has a permanent storage, that is the database, and put into the memory of the client. Okay, using React, it means actually putting in a React state. Okay, and typically it happens at component mount time. We saw this at, let's say, up mount time, that is basically when the whole application starts. But depending on what you're doing, this can happen in other situations. Like you have an application with different pages. You change a page, you go to a different page, like a details for your film in the lab. It's not required at the moment. Okay, you didn't load the information about the details of each film at the beginning. You just loaded the list of fields. You change the page, you want more details about a film. Actually, you are rehydrating the state, a more detailed state, just for a subset of states of your application for that film. So again, this use effect with the empty array can be used in any component. So the moment you change a page, there's another component, not just app, that contains the information about the details about something like our questions or your films and so on. We can use this use effect again. Okay, just runs at mount time of the component. Good. Rehydrating should also happen when we want to refresh the state, because sometimes in application you find a button refresh, right? Why? Because you never know what is going to happen in the server. Others can be using this application as well. Like, think you're booking places. You use that example, but you're booking places on a plane, a train, a theater, and so on. Okay? Nobody notifies your application of the fact that somebody has booked other places, other seats, and so on. But maybe you want to have an updated view because you have a view and you can choose the seats, right? So some application gives you the possibility to press a button like reload, refresh. Other applications do it when you change a page and you come back. Okay, it depends on what you want to do and when, how often, and how much you want to be proactive in doing these kind of things. You need to find a compromise between, the fact that you cannot really refresh every second, okay, because it's too much traffic toward the server. You're not the only one using the server, okay, and also it becomes heavy for the client and for the server. But at the same time, you don't want to, refresh never refresh anything, okay? So what is the good compromise? Well, actually, we will give some advice. The advice is basically when you do operations with the server and you change something, maybe it's a good time to refresh the information that you're showing in the page, okay? But we are not expecting, unless it's explicitly required, that your refresh happens more often. We know it's a web application. It's not like an application that gets notified every time somebody changes something, okay? The opposite operation of rehydrating is dehydrating. It means that you have a state which has become different in your client because you did some modifications. You see here, oops. Oh no, I broke the application. Let me start the server, okay? So it's still there, still waiting, okay? If I start the server now, it doesn't matter because, the request has already been sent and the server was not active, so nobody replied and the request is not replayed, okay? So if you added something, list2, okay, save. Okay, now it's list2, but it's not on the server. This is a state on the client, needs to be updated on the server, okay? So this is the so-called dehydrating operation. So we extracted the new state, typically only the part of the new state that is interesting for us that has changed in the React application, and we send it to the server. Of course, we need APIs for doing this. On the server now we only have the get operation. We need a post, a put, update, delete methods, HTTP method that actually implement the update, creation and deletion, okay? And this, of course, may happen several times using the application, okay? And whenever something in the application state is modified, you may want to save it on the server. Actually, again, it's your choice. Like here, I've edited something, list3. What happens when I click the button? Now, it just changes the state in React, okay? So if I see the answer list in React, it has list3 instead of list. But, this is an event that we can use to trigger a state update on the server. So instead of just setting a new state in the client, we can also call the fetch and go towards the server on the not appropriate API, like a put, I don't know, should be a put, I think here. That will update the state on the server, okay? Now, of course, it does not. And the point is that that's the problem. What will we do in the meanwhile? I mean, we don't get an answer from the server immediately, right? It's like the get. I mean, we do a put and then we need to wait for the answer from the server. What do we show to the user? A spinner? That's a possibility. We show an optimistic update. I think it's afterwards, but yeah. No. Well, somewhere, just tell this one and then finish. So we show that things have been updated, and we hope that the server will update it, and then we will confirm it later. Or we will show nothing, like a spinner, or like nothing has changed, and we wait for the confirmation from the server, and then we will update the interface. I mean, this is a question that has no unique answer. It depends on how you want to treat the user. So either you show the actual updated information immediately, but like with some ways of saying this is temporary. That's an option. Or you want to show the information, I mean, the old information with something saying being updated. That's another option. Or you want just show nothing and wait for the confirmation from the server. Probably the third one is a bit weird, okay, in terms of what the user expects, okay? But you can do anything you think it's appropriate for your application, okay? Like in our application, it's, I mean, what do we do? When you press the save edit, do we move immediately to the list? Do we stay here? Do we disable the button? I mean, that's not really an answer to this question, because it depends on how you want to handle the interaction with the user, okay? So next time, we will add this functionality, okay? So the update, delete, and create, okay? Not necessarily in this order. We start probably from the easiest one, which is the delete, okay? And we will also discuss about the course, which I left it a bit aside for the moment, okay? Which is an issue that, especially in this course, in the cybersecurity course of study, we should understand well, okay? Because it's not just about we have a single server serving our application plus the API server. It's that it is a common situation in many real-world applications, okay? You need to be able to handle different servers, okay? Not just the one from which you get everything, okay? Okay, I think it's enough for today, okay? And what you need to do tomorrow in the lab is just to implement this, I would say, very simple thing. So I invite you to do the optional part as well. Not that difficult if you did all the thing until now. And remember, if you didn't do everything, you can use the solutions that you have put online until now, okay? Like for the server, for instance, because tomorrow you need the server, okay? And you start using the server. Okay, if there are no questions, I think we can stop here for today. And we'll meet tomorrow with me in the lab. So the usual 2 slots, R3B and room 10I, I think. Okay? Okay, thank you.